Yeah, Slippin' and Slidin' by Little Richard. Playing the sax there was Lee Allen, who kept the excitement going while Richard got his breath back on all the other specialty hits, which were recorded at Cosmo's studio in New Orleans. But although he recorded in New Orleans, Lee Allen was born in Kansas City and went to high school in Denver, and didn't go to New Orleans until he went to study music at the Catholic Xavier College, which was when he met local band leader Dave Bartholomew and Paul Gayton.
When I was in college, I was, playing with different little bands on the weekends. They'd come back by the college, pick me up, go play the dance, and bring me back to the college. And it was a Catholic college. And my sisters got quite upset, wanted me to put the horn up, but I would sneak out, and I'd sneak back in the morning. She'd call me down the next day. But, during the time I was at school, I was working with Paul Gayton and Ann Laurie at a club called the Robin Hood in New Orleans. I worked with them. I worked with Paul Gayton almost 10 years.
He was like a local band leader, is that?
Right. As a matter of fact, he was working with a record company out of Chicago, Chess.
But before that was Deluxe, no? Because Annie Laurie and Roy Brown were both on Deluxe. I don't know if Roy Brown ever recorded with
Right.
Paul.
As a matter of fact, Paul Gayton and Dave Bartholomew at first kind of worked together. Deluxe was one of the first record companies that I remember in New Orleans.
And when you were playing in the club with Paul, you were also recording whenever he had a session, you would go in his band?
Oh, yes. Doing studio work.
In the night, mama, in the night, in the wee hours between midnight and day.
Yeah, there's one of Lee's earliest solos from a 1953 song called In the Night by Professor Longhair, which is from the LP New Orleans Piano, which has finally been issued by Atlantic in America and should be available here before long. Professor Longhair was the influence on almost every New Orleans piano player, including Huey Piano Smith.
He played piano on quite a few sessions, too, because he had that typical New Orleans thing.
We heard that he played piano on Tutti Frutti, where everybody used to think it was Little Richard.
He did play piano on some of Richard's things. I can't pinpoint which ones.
Do you remember how that session came about?
What happened, we were the studio band. The original studio band consisted of Earl Palmer, Red Tyler, and myself. Anyhow, it used to be just 5 of us. And these different record companies, after they started hearing some of the music we bring out, were flying people in from New York, West Coast, to be with this New Orleans group we had out. And here comes Bumps Blackwell with Little Richard. And that's when we recorded him. From then on, everything he started recording started being hits, and he kept flying him down to us.
Did you feel like anything special at that session that he did Tutti Frutti? Do you remember feeling that was going to be a hit, or could you never tell?
After his first couple of tunes, yes. It had that foot hand clapping thing, foot stomping hand clapping type thing. Well, because we used to have a lot of fun in the studios, really. And I guess as you could hear on a lot of the stuff we do, or did then, it just came straight from the heart.
And in between playing on other people's records, Lee even found time to play his own every now and then, like this, which is called Rockin' at Cosmos, a tribute to the studio where they did everything.
We were in the studios all day and half the night on 1 or 2 tunes, Of course, things now are a little more precise. They had a union there, true enough, but they weren't as strict as they are now. Then there wasn't anything called overtime. After 4 tunes, then you completed 1 session, then you gone into another session. That was, I guess, from the old days, I guess.
When you said you were the session band at Cosmos, does that mean any record company coming there would find you there?
Right. And that was largely behind Cosmo, and because he would call us, any record company came in, let us know. And then the people started coming into New Orleans asking for us. They said, well, who are those guys on so. So Cosmo immediately calls and said, get down here immediately.
Come on, baby, let the good time roll.
play another great Lee Allen solo on Let the Good Times Roll by Shirley and Lee. The Lee of Shirley and Lee was not Lee Allen. However, the Lee in Walking with Mr. Lee was Lee Allen. Walking with Mr. Lee was a hit he had in about 1958 for the Herald label. Walking with Mr. Lee. I was on the Ember label, not the Herald. Herald was a second label owned by the same man in New York, Al Silver. Well, that was 58, and Lee Allen kept on playing in New Orleans through the early 60s on AFO and Minute. And then in 65, he went to Los Angeles.
I tried to get into studio things there, but it's a little complicated to get into studio things there. And several of the people that I had known in the recording business years ago had changed, you know, quite a bit. Had I moved there around 62, I mean, I would have been much better off. At the time, I didn't care for Los Angeles that way, but now I'm stuck there.
Did you hear any of the tracks of the Gumbo session before?
Only after recording them in the studio.
So you couldn't tell whether, I mean, did you feel at the time it felt good or not?
It felt good, yes.
Yeah.
See, because on that particular thing, there were guys like Batiste and Melvin Lasty. They were on the same thing. And Lasty's brother, who was quite young at the time when I was down in New Orleans, David Lasty, he's also a saxophone player. So, and then they had some little young guy on drums that's from New Orleans.
Staley, Freddie Staley.
Mm-hmm. So what happens, there we were. I mean, it'd been years since we'd all been together. We felt at home. I tried to listen to a couple of those tunes, like Mac River, like he just told me, he said, I want you to do like we did in New Orleans. He used to come around the studios when he was young, too young to play in a club. Every time we did hit the studios, he would be around. At the time he was wanting to play a little guitar or bass, something like that. And from coming to the studio, sitting around there, he started picking up. Next thing you look around and here he is grown. After he got grown, I mean, they started putting him on sessions because by then he had this thing already in him.